So welcome to Thursday on the Pagan Perspective. I'm Yaka, and I'm going to be your new regular Thursday host. Apparently, Megamus is going to, too. I think you can probably only see his tail right now. He seems to know whenever I'm turning the camera on. Anyways, we have 3 questions this week. You've probably already heard them on the previous host videos, but I will post it in the description box below if you want to see exactly what the viewers wrote in. So I'm going to do this a little bit out of order, just based on how long it's going to take to answer the question. So the first one comes from Fran Lawrence, and they ask, does writing or saying blessed be to a person or persons impart blessings? So I think, for me, I think that it's what you intend. What is your intention? If you are intending to, then yes. If you're not, then no. I mean, you could say blessed be to somebody in the most hateful way that you could, and it probably wouldn't actually impart a blessing. It would impart the hatred towards them. I think of a blessing as a spell, and I think spells are intentions. And intentions change the way we relate, the way we behave, and thus the way that the world responds to us or behaves with us. The next question comes from zuryuku, and basically they are asking about meditation and the sounds. They're saying that the nature sounds or peaceful nature meditation kind of sounds that people have suggested that they use for meditation really don't work for them. And then they have found that some dubstep and trance and video game music and things like that, that they've accidentally gone into meditation state, and they want to know, or a trance state, and want to know if that's something that we as hosts have experienced, and if they're the only one. I think just like everyone else has said so far, definitely not the only one. So as I have personally experienced that, yes. When I've lived in bigger cities, I've loved to go clubbing because of that, in the deep trance that I can go into. That much of the culture and music that surrounds some of the more, dubstep and trance and all of those, there can be a very strong tribal, comunitas experience from that can be really powerful. So getting back to the first part of the question about the nature sounds, there wasn't really a question, it was sort of an explanation for the next part. But if it doesn't work for you, don't use it. I think that there is some wisdom and knowledge to be gained from understanding why other people do it that way, but you don't have to do something just because someone else does it that way. Understand why, maybe, if you have enough time in your life, if that's something worthwhile for you. But you're your own person. You don't have to do what everyone else does just because they do it or it works for them. So the last question is a little bit harder to answer because it starts to deal with different definitions that people have and different identities. And people always get sensitive when we start talking about identities. So I have to start by saying I am not a Buddhist. I've never been a Buddhist. To my knowledge, there are no members of my family who are Buddhist or close friends that I have who are Buddhists. There are quite a few Buddhists in my city. I have gone to many events at some of our local temples or monasteries, particularly Zazen and a few Dharma talks. But I'm not coming from the perspective of someone who practices Buddhism in any way or has much experience with it. My experience comes from reading, what I understood of the Dharma talks and Zazen sessions that I attended. Pagan, on the other hand, I identify as a pagan, I identify as being raised pagan, and I can speak a lot more to what I think paganism is. But pretty likely I'm going to express what I think paganism is, and there's a good chance that you're not going to agree. You're going to think paganism is something different, and that's one of the really interesting things about paganism right now. It's very old, but it's also very young in the way that we relate to it and how we're defining it. So first off, from my perspective, paganism can be several different things. There's the perspective of it being anything which is non-Abrahamic, that being Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Anyone who is a religion that is not one of those, by some definitions of pagan, are pagan. I prefer to use a definition that is a little bit more related to the linguistic root of the word, having to do with the people of the countryside. I'm sure you can find a lot of interesting videos here on YouTube or articles online about the origins of that word. But it has, when I look at that, when I see it having to do with the countryside, having to do with the beliefs of the people living in the countryside, and that would be people who are more connected to the seasons, to the cycles of nature. So for me, a pagan is someone whose understanding of the world, whose values and beliefs are centered in, and practices specifically centered in earth-based, or an understanding or relationship with the earth, with nature, with the cycles of life and death. That's what I really think the core of paganism is. Now you'll find some folks who say, well, it has more actually to do with the deities, with the gods, and that's, you know, also a completely valid argument. By those definitions, by the first definition, Buddhists would be pagan because they're not Abrahamic. I don't know if there's Buddhist Christians or something like mixing of that, then it gets really gray and kind of hard to tell. By the definition that I use, I don't think so. Because my experience with Buddhism, and again this is just one experience I've had, particularly with Americans in Buddhism, because that seems to be the most common form of Buddhism in the area that I'm in. There is this focus on enlightenment, on freeing oneself from suffering, and suffering is living, suffering is existence. From this goal to reach a higher state of being, which to me implies a separation from the earth, from where we are now. And the way that I practice paganism and the way that I view paganism is very much trying to become more part of the world that we're in, part of the world that we are. I mean, it's almost a misnomer to say that we're in the world, because it's like saying that you're in yourself, that you're, because if you're part of the world, you see what I'm trying to get at? So I wouldn't tend to think of Buddhism as being pagan, because it doesn't have the theistic aspect that's important for some pagans. I don't either. I don't think that's essential. But it doesn't seem to have the earth-centered element that, to me, is essential in paganism. I'm very curious on how people blend paganism and Buddhism, because I've heard quite a few people, a lot of the subs talked about it, not the subs, but the folks who were auditioning to be subs. This video has gone on for a very long time. We'll probably have to edit a little bit of it out, but I'm super excited to be here on Thursday nights with you folks, and comment below, let us know, if you are a Buddhist pagan or a pagan Buddhist or someone who identifies that way, how do you incorporate those practices into your life? And keep watching for the next couple of videos this week.